Welcome to Ethics 101. I'm Bobby Tang. Today we will talk about ethics. When you approach a common layperson and ask them what ethics are, they'll typically probably answer it has to do with whether or not something feels good or bad. But feelings are very subjective, so that's not a very good way of trying to define what ethics are. Another approach may be whether or not if something is legal. But there's a flaw in that too. If you look at before the civil rights movement, it was legal to discriminate against people based on their race. Pretty much everybody would say that that type of behavior or law is unethical today. So we need a better way to think about ethics. And a good way to think about it would be to look at it based on frameworks, ways that we can define a certain type of ethical philosophy. Today I'll be talking about two frameworks that I mostly identify with. One is the utilitarian approach. The second is the virtue approach. Using these two approaches gives us a good balance of realism and idealism. So let's look at what the utilitarian approach involves. It's basically the approach where the moral right will give you the greatest benefit to all the people that are affected. And there's three steps. First, you look at the problem, and you look at the parties involved, and you evaluate your course of action. So you have one action, who will be affected, who will be hurt, another action, who will be affected, who will be hurt, and then finally you would make your decision to take the action that benefits the most amount of people. So using this approach, it actually would be okay to lie or manipulate a situation in order to extract the greatest benefit for the greatest number of people involved. So the second approach is the virtue approach. And with the virtue approach, it's probably the closest approach when the common person thinks about whether or not something is good or bad. The virtue approach stipulates that people will work towards a common good through self-reflection, that the human condition will continually improve. So there are certain characteristics that would fall under the virtue approach: courage, generosity, self-control, fairness, and tolerance. So now that we've defined the two different types of frameworks, let's use some examples. First, I'll start with an extreme example. Say you have a suspect, and this particular suspect has knowledge that can prevent the death of thousands of people. Now, you can prevent these deaths by torturing this person for this person to give you information. If you use a utilitarian approach, you would definitely go ahead and torture this person because the maximum benefit is you'll save thousands of people. If you use the virtue approach, you may not choose to torture this person because it'll go against having integrity, having compassion, just certain good values of society. But it's a slippery slope, so it really depends on every individual's values on how they would choose what action to take towards this person. So let's move away from that more extreme example and go into a real estate business example. Say you're representing a client in a purchase of a property. You know that your client is willing to pay $5.5 million for it. The seller is asking for $6 million. The market price is between $5 to $5.5 million. You can go to this seller and say that, listen, $5 million is my best offer, take it or leave it, my client walks. If you use the utilitarian approach, that would be perfectly acceptable because it's still benefiting both parties. You're not really hurting anybody. But if you use a virtue approach, that wouldn't be good because you're actually lying and you would violate being honest and having integrity. So this is why you need to combine both approaches. Another example that I can give is if you are representing a client where you are trying to build a large shopping center, and the result of building this shopping center would be a displacement of a low-income housing project that would affect 3,000 people. But the survey that you've done was if you did go ahead and build the shopping center, it would benefit 200,000 people in the community. So what would you do? If you use the utilitarian approach, you'd go ahead and do it. You wouldn't care about the people that you're displacing because the result would be a maximum benefit of 200,000 people versus the non-benefit of 3,000 people. But if you use the virtue approach, you wouldn't go ahead and build a shopping center because you violate fairness. It wouldn't be fair for the 3,000 people that are being displaced. So if you use a mix of both approaches, you can try to find a compromise. One would be that you can offer the 3,000 people that are being displaced a very fair amount of money for them to be displaced. It may not be the most ideal situation, but still it's fair to both parties. If you want to learn more about this, you can visit the website that you see. Thank you.